If you've ever fired up a torch to sweat a copper joint, you already know the drill. You clean the pipe, brush on the flux, heat everything up, and pray that solder flows into the joint the way it should. And even when you do everything right, there's still a decent chance you end up with a pinhole leak that doesn't show up until after you turn the water back on and walk away. Now, that's frustrating enough out in the open, but most real plumbing jobs don't happen on a workbench. You're crammed under a sink, wedged behind a water heater, or working inches away from floor joists and insulation where an open flame is a genuine fire hazard. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 different ways to connect copper pipe that don't require a torch, solder, or flux. And stick around to the end because I've got a bonus tip that could save you hundreds of dollars the next time you're facing a plumbing emergency. Let's get into it. Knowing how to connect copper without soldering is honestly one of the most valuable skills a homeowner can pick up. It opens up repairs and upgrades that used to require a professional. And every single method I'm about to show you is something you can learn in an afternoon. Once you see how these work, you're going to wonder why anyone still bothers with a torch at all. So let's start with the foundation that applies to every method. Before we talk about any specific fitting or tool, you need to understand that every single one of these 5 methods depends on one thing, and that's proper pipe preparation. If you skip this step or do it halfway, it doesn't matter which connector you choose. You're going to have problems. First, you need a clean square cut. You can use a standard tube cutter, which is what most people have, but I really like the auto cut style cutters for tight spaces. You just snap it onto the pipe, rotate it around, and it feeds itself deeper with every turn until it cuts clean through. They make them in 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch sizes, and they're worth every penny when you're working behind a wall or under a cabinet where you can barely fit your hand. Once the pipe is cut, you need to deburr it. That means removing the little ridge of metal that forms on the inside and outside edge of the cut. Most tube cutters have a small triangular reaming blade that folds out from the body. Just insert it into the pipe end, give it a few twists, and that inner burr comes right off. For the outside edge, a piece of emery cloth or even fine sandpaper works perfectly. You want the end of that pipe smooth and round with no rough edges, no raised lips, nothing that could interfere with an O-ring or ferrule getting a proper seal. This takes about 30 seconds per cut, and it's the single most important thing you can do to prevent leaks with any of these methods. One more thing. If you're working on a line that still has some water in it, don't panic. Most of these methods work just fine on a wet pipe, which is a huge advantage over soldering, where even a tiny bit of moisture will ruin the joint. I'll point out which methods handle water best as we go. Now let's talk about the first method. And honestly, this is the one that changed the game for homeowners. Push fit fittings. The most popular brand is SharkBite. And once you see how these work, you'll understand why plumbers keep a few in their truck for emergencies and why homeowners have fallen in love with them. The concept is dead simple. You deburr your copper pipe, and then you push the fitting straight onto the end. That's it. No crimping, no wrenching, no special tools whatsoever. Inside the fitting, there's a stainless steel tooth ring. And that's what grabs onto the pipe and locks it in place, You physically cannot pull it back off without a special disconnect clip. Behind that tooth ring sits an O-ring that creates the watertight seal. So the teeth hold the pipe in. The O-ring keeps the water from getting out. And the whole thing takes about 5 seconds to install. Now, here's where SharkBites really shine. They work on an active leak. Let's say you've got a burst pipe in your basement and water is spraying everywhere. You shut off the main if you can, cut the damaged section out, deburr the ends, even with water dripping down your arms, and push on a SharkBite coupling or end cap. The water stops instantly. You just bought yourself time to either finish the repair yourself or call a professional without your house flooding the entire time. I've got SharkBite fittings in my own home that have been in service for years without a single issue. No discoloration, no drips, no problems at all. Some folks online will tell you they're junk and they always leak, but in my experience, that almost always comes down to poor pipe preparation. If you deburr properly and push the fitting on to the correct depth, these things are rock solid. SharkBite even makes a depth gauge tool so you can mark the pipe and know exactly how far to insert it. They come in 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch sizes. And they make every type of fitting you could need. Couplings, elbows, T's, valves, caps, you name it. By the way, if you're finding this advice helpful, you should know it's just a small sample of what I've put into my new guide, The Ultimate Plumbing Playbook. It's packed with step-by-step instructions for hundreds of repairs that can save you thousands. To grab your copy, you can scan the QR code on the screen right now, or just use the first link in the description below. All right, let's continue. The second method is ProPress, and this is what the professionals are using on job sites every single day. ProPress fittings look similar to standard copper fittings, but they've got a slightly raised ring around the outside, and inside that ring sits a precision O-ring. The way it works is you slide the fitting onto your deburred copper pipe. Then you use a battery-powered pressing tool to crimp that raised ring down tight. The tool applies a very specific amount of force that compresses the copper and the O-ring simultaneously, creating a connection that's actually stronger than a soldered joint. The press happens in about 4 seconds. You hear a click, the jaws release, and you've got a permanent watertight connection. No heat, no chemicals, no waiting for anything to cure. And because there's no flame involved, you can work right next to wood framing, insulation, or drywall, or without any fire risk at all. ProPress fittings are available for everything. Straight couplings, 90-degree elbows, 45-degree elbows, T's, reducers, ball valves, you name it. Replacing a shutoff valve that used to require draining the line and sweating 2 joints now takes about 60 seconds with ProPress. The downside is the professional cordless pressing tool. These run around $2,000, which is why your plumber owns one and you probably don't. But that brings us to method number 3. You can buy a manual version of that same pressing tool online for around $150 to $200, and it does the exact same job. It's just powered by your hands instead of a battery. The tool has 2 long handles that you squeeze together, and the jaws compress the fitting just like the powered version. The head rotates so you can get into tight spaces, and it comes with interchangeable dies for 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch copper pipe. I'll be honest with you, the manual tool takes some muscle. You're compressing copper with hand force, so it's not effortless. But here's a trick. Most of these tools have extendable handles. Pull them out to their full length, and you get significantly more leverage, which makes a big difference, especially on 3/4-inch fittings. If you're planning to do more than 1 or 2 plumbing projects, the manual ProPress tool could easily pay for itself the first time you use it. One valve. Replacement by a plumber can cost $300 to $500. This tool plus the fittings will run you a fraction of that. Now, method 4 is the oldest no-solder connection method out there, and that's compression fittings. These have been used in plumbing for decades, and they're still one of the most reliable ways to join copper pipe. A compression fitting has 3 parts: the body, which is usually brass, a compression nut, and a small brass ring called a ferrule. Here's how it works. You slide the compression nut onto the pipe first, then slide the ferrule on behind it. Insert the pipe into the fitting body, then thread the nut onto the body by hand. As you tighten the nut with a wrench, it forces the ferrule to compress down onto the copper pipe, creating a tight mechanical seal. The key here is don't over-tighten. I see this mistake constantly. You want to go hand tight first, and then about 1 full turn with a wrench, maybe a turn, and a quarter. If you crank on it too hard, you'll deform the ferrule and actually create a leak instead of preventing one. Compression fittings are perfect for exposed connections like under sinks, at shut-off valves, and for supply line hookups. They're inexpensive, available at any hardware store, and you don't need anything beyond a standard adjustable wrench. The one limitation is they're not ideal for inside walls or buried connections because they're a mechanical joint that could theoretically loosen over time with vibration. Method 5 is what I call the emergency repair option, and that's epoxy repair couplings, sometimes marketed as cold solder. These consist of a 2-part epoxy compound that you mix together and apply around a copper pipe to seal a pinhole, leak, or small crack. Some versions come as a wrap that you saturate with water and wind around the pipe, and it hardens into a rigid shell. Now, I want to be up front with you. This is a temporary fix. It's not a permanent plumbing solution, and no professional would consider it one. But when you've got a pinhole leak at 11 o'clock at night and you can't get a plumber until Monday, an epoxy repair coupling can stop that leak and buy you time. The pipe has to be dry and clean for the epoxy to bond, so you'll need to shut off the water and dry the area thoroughly. Follow the instructions on the package for mixing and cure time, which is usually around 20 to 30 minutes for initial set and 24 hours for full cure. Use it as a bridge to get you to a proper repair, and it serves that purpose very well. Let's talk about some common problems you might run into with these methods and how to solve them. First, a slow drip after installing a push-fit fitting. 9 times out of 10, this means the pipe wasn't deburred properly or wasn't inserted to the full depth. Remove the fitting using the disconnect clip, clean up the piping, mark your insertion depth, and reinstall. That almost always solves it. Second, a ProPress fitting that weeps at one end. This usually happens when the pipe wasn't fully seated into the fitting before pressing. Once it's pressed, there's no undoing it. You'll need to cut out the fitting and start fresh with a new one. That's why I always double check that the pipe is pushed all the way into the fitting before I squeeze the tool. Third, a compression fitting that keeps dripping no matter how much you tighten it. Stop tightening. Seriously. If it's leaking after a turn and a quarter, more force is not the answer. Take it apart. Inspect the ferrule for damage and check the pipe in for burrs or an uneven cut. Replace the ferrule if it's deformed, because once the brass is crushed unevenly, it'll never seal right. Fourth, push fit fittings that won't slide onto the pipe. This usually means there's a ridge or burr on the outside of the pipe catching the O-ring. Clean the outside with emery cloth until it's smooth and shiny for about an inch back from the cut. Fifth, an epoxy repair that cracks or peels off. The surface wasn't clean or dry enough when you applied it. Epoxy needs bare, dry copper to bond to. Any moisture, corrosion, or residue will prevent adhesion. Clean thoroughly with emery cloth and make sure the water is completely off before your next attempt. If you follow the preparation steps we covered at the beginning, especially the deburring and clean cuts, you'll avoid the vast majority of these issues. Now, for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning, and this one is worth remembering. Before you start any of these repairs, take a photo of the existing plumbing with your phone. Get a wide shot and a close-up. This sounds simple, but it has saved me more times than I can count. When you're in the middle of a repair and you've cut out a section of pipe, it's surprisingly easy to lose track of which direction a line was running, where a T was oriented, or how the valve was positioned. That photo on your phone becomes your reference map. I've also found it helpful at the hardware store. Instead of trying to remember whether you need a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch fitting, you pull up the photo and compare it to what's on the shelf. It takes 2 seconds before you start cutting, and it can save you a trip back to the store and a lot of frustration. Before you go, I want to make sure you know about my complete guide, the Ultimate Plumbing Playbook. It goes way deeper than we can in a single video, with 85 pages covering everything from clearing any clog to replacing your own water heater. If you want to stop wasting money on simple fixes, this book is for you. Just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description to get your copy. Thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.